Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for United Players' presentation of the importance of being earnest. Sorry, get my teeth in. Lucky I'm not on stage tonight. I'd really like to thank the Dean and Chapter for allowing us to put this on in here this evening and last night as well. And I know that Adrian was here yesterday evening and Philip was as well, and they really enjoyed themselves. So hopefully you guys will have a good evening tonight. This play is a play of 3 acts, so there will be 2 intervals. Drinks will be being served over there. We don't have the luxury of front curtains tonight, so if you don't want the illusion to be ruined as we're changing the set around, look the other way. But if you're interested to see how it all works, then feel free to sit here and soak it all up. The set is actually up for a nomination in the Kent Drama Awards. We performed this at St William's Church in Wilde about 3 weeks ago. One of the nominations it's picked up for is for the set, so a big thank you to Bob, who I know isn't here at the moment, but he's put a lot of effort into this. Do enjoy yourselves this evening, people. It is a great play. Sit back and relax, and I present the importance of being earnest. Thank you. What I was playing, eh?
I didn't think polite to listen, sir.
No, I'm sorry for that. For your sake, I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I play with such wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that last Thursday, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing dined with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Now tell me, why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, it is invariably the servants that drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I put it down to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I find that in married households, the wine is rarely of the finest grade.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralising as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it, of course, myself. I've only been married the once, and that was a result of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person, sir.
I'm not sure I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It's not very interesting. I don't think of it much myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. Thank you, Lane, that will do.
Thank you, sir.
Really, Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. If the lower orders can't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, sir.
Ernest, my dear fellow, what brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else would bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it's customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses others. It is excessively boring.
And who are these people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Eh? Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello. Why over teacups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that's all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way she flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolen. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you said you were here for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
There is nothing romantic in proposing. It's very romantic to be in love, but nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why? One may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose minds are so curiously constituted.
There's no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They've been ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter it is too.
Well, there's no need to eat it as though you're going to eat it all. You behave like you're married to her already. You're not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
What on earth do you mean?
In the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you will first have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case that Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
You mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would have let me know. You've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. Very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would. I happen to be unusually hard up at present.
There's no point in offering a large reward now the thing is found.
I think that particularly mean of you, Ernest, I must say. But no matter. For now that I look at the inscription inside, I see that the thing is not yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with 100 times. You have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
It's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. Half of modern culture depends upon what one shouldn't read.
I'm quite aware of the fact, and I do not propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one can talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
But this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone by the name of Cecily. And you've already said you don't know anyone by that name.
If you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not so tall. Surely that is a matter that an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that all aunts should be exactly like your aunt. That's absurd. For heaven's sake, give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, would call her own nephew her uncle, I can't make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Earnest.
It isn't Earnest, it's Jack.
You've always told me your name was Earnest. I've introduced you to everybody as Earnest. You answer to the name of Earnest. You look as though your name was Earnest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's absurd you're now saying your name is not Earnest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany. I shall keep this as proof that your name is Earnest, in case you ever attempt to deny it, to me, to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else for that matter.
Well, my name is Earnest in town, and Jack in the country. The cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her uncle. Come, dear boy, you much better have the whole thing out at once.
My dear Algie, you talk exactly as though you're a dentist. It's very vulgar to speak like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
That is exactly what dentists do. Now, come on, tell me the whole story. And I may mention that I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist. I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I will reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression just as soon as you kindly inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there's nothing improbable about my explanation. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect, you could not possibly appreciate, lives in my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
There's nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited. Let me tell you candidly, the place is not in Shropshire.
Oh, I suspected as such. I've bumbled all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algie, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You're hardly serious enough yourself. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one adopts a high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. As a high moral tone can hardly be said to produce much to either one's health or happiness. In order to come up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives at the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear young fellow, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
I can quite understand that.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. Leave it to those who have not been to university. They do it so well in the daily papers.
What on earth do you mean?
What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you're a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know. You have invented a very useful younger brother by the name of Earnest, in order that you may travel up to London whenever you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may travel down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. Were it not for his extraordinary bad health, for instance, I would not be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. Very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people more than not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the sort. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, they always treat me like a member of the family, and either send me down with no woman at all, or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. It's not pleasant, it's not even decent. And that sort of thing's enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands, perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. Gwendolyn accepts me. I'm going to kill my brother. In fact, I kill him in any case. Cecily's becoming a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. And I suggest you do the same with with your invalid friend, one with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will do very well to know Bunbury.
A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Oh, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry. Certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. What you don't seem to realise is that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and the happy English home has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, stop trying to be cynical. Perfectly easy to be cynical.
It's not easy being anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only creditors and relatives ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get it out of the way for 10 minutes in order that you may have an opportunity of proposing to Gwendolen, might I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. So shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
My word, you are smart.
I'm always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon. I was obliged to call upon dear Lady Harbury. I haven't been there since our poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you've promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane. Why, they're new cucumber sandwiches. I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers to be had in the market today, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
Thank you, Lane. That will do.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It has certainly changed its colour. From what cause, I of course cannot say. Thank you, Algernon. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, that I shall have to decline the pleasure of your company this evening after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle will have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just received a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is dreadfully ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury's a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice of me as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely upon you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something to encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say. but in most cases is probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he's still conscious. But I think I can promise that he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't talk. If one plays bad music, people don't listen. But I'll run over the programme I've drawn out. If you'll kindly accompany me into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the programme will be delightful. After a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People seem to think they are improper, and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
But I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached provincial pulpits, I'm told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me. But you don't mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't care much for the name of Earnest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I think there are lots of other, much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? Oh no, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, have been more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman married to a man called John. She will probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not so quite indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you have not proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched upon.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing. I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen.
Yes, Mr. Worthing. What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but But you don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Joel does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from that semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you're not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or otherwise, as the case may be. It's hardly a matter that she can be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma?
In the carriage, Gwendolen. Gwendolen, the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. I have the same list that the Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to add your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I am glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to be married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education has no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes, and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What with the duties expected of one during one's lifetime, and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land ceases to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said of land.
I have a country house, with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend upon that for my real income. No. As far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I presume? A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen can hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it's let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham, I don't know her.
She's a lady who goes about very little. She's considerably advanced in years.
Ah, nowadays, that's no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. Well, that can easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a Liberal Unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us or come in the evening at any rate. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. I mean, who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce? Or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I'd lost my parents. It'd be nearer the truth to say my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, an elderly gentleman of a kindly and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, so he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman with his first-class ticket to the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles attached to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew find this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake of his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I confess I am somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it has handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to? As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom in a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now. But it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognised position in good society.
Well, may I ask what you would advise me to do? I need not say I'd do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations, and to make a definite effort to produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage that. I can produce a handbag at a moment's notice. It's in my dressing room at home. Surely that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What is it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would allow our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parson. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For goodness sakes, Algy, don't play that ghastly tune. How idiotic you are.
Didn't it go off all right, old chap? Don't tell me she refused you. I know she's always refusing people. It's the way she has. I think it most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolen is as right as a trivet. As far as she's concerned, we're engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. Don't actually know what a gorgon is like, but I'm sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she's a monster about being a myth, which is rather unfair. Oh, I do beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear fellow, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't the remotest knowledge about how to live, or the smallest instinct about when to die.
I can quite understand that. Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't?
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
It's exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that is his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilised life should be.
We're sick to death of cleverness. Everybody's clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The whole thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
What, the fools? Well, the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, have you told Gwendolyn the truth about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
Oh, the truth isn't the sort of thing one tells a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died abroad in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die quite suddenly of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You'd much better say a severe chill.
You are sure severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest to be carried off suddenly in Paris of a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said Miss Cardew is a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Don't you miss him a good deal?
Oh, Cecily's not a silly romantic girl, I'm pleased to say. She has a capital appetite, goes on long walks and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I'd rather like to see Cecily.
I take very good care that you don't. She's excessively pretty and only just 18.
Does Gwendolyn know you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these sort of things out to people. Gwendolyn and Cecily are perfectly certain to become extremely great friends. Bet you anything you like, but half an hour after they have met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women always say a lot of other things to each other before they say that. Now, if we're going to get a good table at Willis's, we really ought to go and dress. Do you know it's nearly 7?
Oh, it's always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew when you weren't.
What should we do after dinner? Should we go to a theatre?
Oh no, I loathe listening.
Well, shall we go to a club?
Oh no, I hate talking.
Or shall we trot round to the Empire at 10?
Oh no, I can't bear looking at things. It is so silly.
Well, what shall we do then?
Nothing.
It's awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work when there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Do kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that.
My own one?
Ernest, we may never be married. By the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibres of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitively incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Walton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I think I'll go bumbering.
Yes, sir.
I don't think I'll be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the bumbering suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're such a perfect pessimist.
I try to give satisfaction, sir.
Thank you, Lane, that will do.
Thank you, sir.
There's a sensible intellectual girl, the only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that aren't serious.
And that is nonsense. You never speak anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Refreshments are served.
Cecily, surely such utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially at a time when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray, open it at page 15. We shall repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German when he was leaving the town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving the town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious, I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour is especially to be commended in one as comparatively young as he is. I know no one with a high sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. Are you forgetting his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother?
Well, I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prison. I'm sure you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could reclaim a young man that by his own brother's admission is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favour of this modern mania of turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so shall he reap. Put away your diary, Cecily. Indeed, I really do not see why you must keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I'd probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles of things that had never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden. Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, that you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is very strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically, my metaphor being drawn from bees. I suppose Mr. Worthing has not yet returned from town?
We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man his brother appears to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely, one drawn from the pagan authors. No doubt I shall see you both at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, that I will have that stroll with you. I find I do have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy during my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee, you may admit, it is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
Mr. Earnest Worthing, miss, has just driven over from the station. Well, he's brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Earnest Worthing, B for the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him, Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. I mentioned he seemed most disappointed, but I did mention that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He seemed most anxious to have a word with you for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here. I suppose you were to talk to housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does!
You are my little cousin Cecily, I am sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
Well, if you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. Well, that will be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now you come to mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
Well, I don't think you should be proud of that, although I'm sure it's very pleasant.
It's much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go out by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, of course I know how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to attain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
Well, I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He's absolutely no taste in neckties at all.
Oh, I don't think you require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
To Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you'd have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I've heard of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging, cousin Cecily. This world is good enough for me.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid that I'm not. That is why I would like you to reform me. You might make that your mission, cousin Cecily.
Afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Or would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I shall. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
How thoughtless of me! I should have remembered. When one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have an appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Marechal?
I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it'd be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw in my life.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
Too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up until the present day. And you do not seem to have realised, dear Doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is not a man equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often, I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can be depended upon. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. Yes, horticulturally, my metaphor is drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing?
We did not look for you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
My dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Earnest? Dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I hope he will profit by it.
My dear Mr. Worthing, I offer my sincere condolence. You at least have the consolation of knowing you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No. He died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, so it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, my dear Miss Prism. Charity. None of us are perfect. I myself are peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No. He seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very stable state of mind at the last. No doubt you'll wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to any occasion, joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the Cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies that I drew.
Oh, that reminds me, Dr. Chasuble. You mentioned christenings, I think. I suppose you know how to christen all right. I mean, you're continually christening all the time, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in the parish. I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
Was there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was unmarried, I believe, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear Doctor. No, I'm very fond of children. The fact is, I'd like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you grave doubts on the matter?
I certainly intend to have. I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling, I think, is all that is necessary, or indeed advisable. Our weather is so changeable. Was there any particular hour that you wish this ceremony to be performed?
Oh, I might trot round about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. As it happens, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently at an outlying cottage on your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened alongside other babies. It would seem childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will intrude no longer into this house of sorrow. I merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What appear bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! I'm so pleased to see you back! What horrid clothes you've got on! Do go and change them!
Cecily!
My child, my child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you've had a toothache. And I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother Ernest! He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that, Uncle Jack. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I would tell him to come out and you would shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. I think it's perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you how very sorry I am for the trouble that I have caused you, and that I intend to leave a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here absurd. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, who he goes to visit often. And surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking to you about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury? Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else for that matter. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults are entirely on my side, but I must say that I find Brother John's coldness towards me peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it's the first time I've come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never!
Well, it's the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see such a perfect reconciliation. I think we might leave the 2 brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel, Algy, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any bumbling here.
I've put Mr. Earnest's luggage in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that's all right.
What?
I've unpacked Mr. Earnest's luggage, sir. I've put it next to yours, sir.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay for more than a week this time.
Merriman, order a dog cart. Mr. Earnest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
You quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You're not to talk to Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go and change? It's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who's actually staying with you in your house as your guest for a whole week. I call it grotesque.
You're certainly not staying with me for a whole week as my guest or anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
Well, I certainly won't leave whilst you are in deep mourning. It'd be most unkind. If I were in deep mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I'd think it most unfriendly if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you don't take too long. I've never known anyone take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, at any rate, better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, and your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you've got to leave by the 4:05. This bumming music calling has not been a great success to you.
Well, I think it's been a great success. I am in love with Cecily and that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another bumbling. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you on a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
And have we got to part?
Yes, I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart's at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes?
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you. If I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you a great credit, Earnest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to see it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's records of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Earnest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I am quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Earnest. When one is dictating, one should always speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
Oh, I don't think you would tell me that you loved me wildly, passionately, devotedly and hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't make any sense, does it?
Cecily,
The dog cart's waiting, sir.
tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying until next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you, Cecily. I love you. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy. Of course. Why? We've already been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes. It'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how do we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or another. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day I bought this little ring in your name, and this is a little bangle with a true lover's knot that I promised you always to wear.
Did I buy this for you? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's an excuse always given for you leading such a bad life. And here is a box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? My own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Do let me read them.
Oh no, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I had broken off the engagement were so beautiful and so badly spelt. But even now, I can hardly read them without crying a little.
Was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was, on the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Earnest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why did you break it off? What had I done? I'd done absolutely nothing, Cecily. I'm very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, with little help from others.
I'm glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, will you, Cecily?
I don't think I can break it off now that I've actually met you. And besides, of course, there is a question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling. It's always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name is Earnest. There's something in the name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
Do you mean to say you couldn't love me if I went by some other name?
But what name?
Well, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name Algernon.
My own sweet, loving little Cecily, I really don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not a bad name at all. And it's quite an aristocratic name. Half the chaps that get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if I did go for the name of Algie, could you not love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I feel I'd never be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly practised in all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, a most important business.
Oh?
I'll be back in half an hour.
Considering that we have been engaged since February the 14th, and I only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for as long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax, miss, has come to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
No, miss. I saw him go in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon, and you can bring some tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack and some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Miss Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew, what a very sweet name. Something tells me we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much, after we've known each other for such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the perfect sphere for the man, and certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also.
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed?
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How very secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. Cecily, I am very fond of you. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. Earnest has a upright nature. He's a very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern no less than ancient history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I am sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Oh, that accounts for it. And now that I come to think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? But you are quite sure it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, I see no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never approach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say I've never seen a spade. It is obvious our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay for tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many, Miss Fairfax. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden you have here, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there are any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
Ah, that is what the newspapers are calling agriculture depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, so I've been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea. No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I will not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighbourhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you're engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you, you may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack, oh.
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn.
Yes, the good heavens! I mean Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such a thought into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh! Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It's been John for years.
A gross deception has been practised on the both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I'd like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest. So it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all, in fact. I've never had a brother, and I have not the smallest intentions of having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never, not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what called bumbering, I suppose.
Yes, the most wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
We have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
Oh, it's absurd. One has a right to Bunbury wherever one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about bumbering. What you were serious about, I haven't the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such a trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury's quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, dear boy. And a very good thing, too.
Your brother's looking a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. Not a bad thing, either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say you're taking in a sweet, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defence at all in your deceiving a brilliantly clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
There's certainly no chance of you marrying Miss Fairfax.
Well, I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that's no business of yours.
Well, if it was my business, I certainly wouldn't talk about it. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How can you sit there calmly eating muffins when we're in this horrible trouble I can't quite make out? You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can hardly eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It's the only way to eat them.
So it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all, under the circumstances.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. I'm currently eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
There's no reason why I should eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you'd have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man makes his own muffins in his own garden.
But you've just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it's perfectly heartless of you, under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
Yes, but the muffins are the same.
How dear, what to goodness you would go?
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. I never go without having my dinner. Nobody ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 6:15 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning, Dr. Cathedral, to christen myself this afternoon, and I will naturally take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. You both can't be christened Earnest, it's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There's no evidence I've been christened by anyone. I think it's strictly probable I never was. It's highly different in your case. You've been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. I think if you're unsure about your ever having been christened, I think it rather dangerous you're venturing upon it now. It might make you quite unwell. I need hardly remind you that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris with a severe chill.
Yes, but you said a severe chill wasn't hereditary.
It usedn't to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. What the science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Oh, that is nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
You had the muffins again, Jack. I wish you wouldn't. I've told you I'm particularly fond of muffins. There's only 3 left.
But I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth do you allow it to be served up to your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality.
Algernon, I've already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
But I haven't finished my tea yet. And there's still 2 muffins left. There's more refreshments.
not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It is the only thing to do now.
Silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, would you kindly answer me the following question? Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that doesn't affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True, in matters of grave importance. Style, not sincerity, is a vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the matter, but I intend to crush him. This is not the moment for German scepticism. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean no.
True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Can you not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier, that is all.
Our Christian names, is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you're ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely above us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage, of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell!
Good heavens!
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here, sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, or physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme upon the influence of a permanent income on tort. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But of course you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I'm engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
Is it in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no, Bunbury doesn't reside here. Bunbury's somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury's dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did Mr. Bunbury die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean that Bunbury was found out. That is what I mean. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live, so Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted upon proper medical advice. And now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, Mr. Worthing, may I ask, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding, in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I don't know whether there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that goes on seems to me to be particularly above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiries would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is a granddaughter of late Mr. Thomas Cardew, 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof of either authenticity?
I've carefully preserved the court guides of the period, Lady Bracknell. They're open to your inspection.
Oh, I've known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby. A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Marksbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far I'm satisfied.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you'll be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both for German and the English variety.
A life crowded with incident, I see, although perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favour of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, may I ask whether Miss Cardew has any little fortune?
About £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000? And in the funds? Miss Cardew seems a most attractive young lady. Now that I look at her. A few girls of the present age of any solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Over here, dear. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair looks almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvellous result in a very short space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lancing, and after 3 months her own husband didn't know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn around, sweet child. No, beside you is what I want. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. 2 weak points in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. Chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They are worn very high just at present. Alton?
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardews' profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't give twopence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people that can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to rely upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I met Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind. But I never dreamt of one moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Carde's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes legally of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
What grounds, may I ask?
Pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is I do not approve of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in town, on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by the false pretence of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brut 89 wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon of alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And, what makes his conduct all the more heartless, he is well aware from the first that I have no brother. I have never had a brother, and I have not the smallest intentions of ever having one in the future. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I've decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct towards you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
I'll have a hear, dear. How old are you, dear?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration to her age. Indeed, no woman should ever be accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at dinner parties. Well, it will not be long before you are of age, and thus free from the restraints of tutelage. For I do not think that your guardian's consent is a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell. It is only fair to tell you that according to her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not become legally of age till she is 35.
That does not seem to me a very grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth, who, of their own free choice, have remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instant in point. To my knowledge, she's been 35 ever since she reached the age of 40, which is many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is now. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algy, could you wait for me until I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I cannot wait till that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I am not punctual myself, I know, but I like punctuality in others. And waiting even to be married is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say shows a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the decision is entirely in your hands. The moment you consent to my marriage to Gwendolen, I'll most gladly allow your nephew to form alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear. We've missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptised. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be most displeased if he learnt that this was how you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that as things are now, Dr. Chasuble, it would be of much practical use to either of us.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have totally refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood appears to be one peculiarly secular, I shall return to the church at once. Indeed, I have been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I'm on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect? Remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for the last hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism. Prism! Where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator containing a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, after the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism! Where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby for a stroll in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I never can forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited that handbag that contained the infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to happen. They're hardly considered the thing.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if he's having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I wish you would come to some conclusion.
This suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends upon your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the injury it sustained during the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. And here on the lining is a stain caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here on the lock, my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby placed into it.
You?
Yes, Mother.
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that is a serious blow. However, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot dependents wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is a lady who can tell you who you truly are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
The news that I am about to give you may not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I always knew I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have doubted I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel, you must treat me with more respect in the future. You never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Not until today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, though I have been a little out of practice.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens, I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. When Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been bestowed upon you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That settles it. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the General's Christian name was. I've no doubt that he had one. It was eccentric, that was true. That was in later years. And that was the cause of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and matters of that kind.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear fellow, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The General was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. M. Generals. Malum, Maxbaum, Magley. What ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief. Lieutenant 1840. Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel General 1869. Christian names. Earnest John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, my name was Earnest, didn't I? I mean, it is Earnest. It naturally is Earnest.
Yes, I remember now. The General was called Earnest. And you had a particular reason for disliking that name?
Ernest, my own Ernest. I knew from the start that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it's a terrible thing for a man to realise suddenly that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia!
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realised for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.